guys, welcome back to the Share Parenting Podcast, where every mom deserves to feel sure of her parenting. I'm your host, Sammy Bell, creator of Share Parenting and author of Share Parenting Building Blocks to Create Their Best Childhood. Here on the podcast, we address the issues that make moms question themselves or their kids, and we discuss creative solutions that meet the needs of each unique mother and child. Let's dive in. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am thrilled to do our first kind of live podcast interview in the group. And today we have a wonderful guest who I've known for several years now. And I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit about what you do and what you want to share with us today.
Sure. So my name's Mariana. I go by Mariana Feliz on Facebook. And I don't know how I want to introduce myself. Like, I am a nurse, a case manager. I work in administration, and I also grew a pretty successful coaching company. I did that for several years. I closed it down a couple years ago from burnout and stuff like that. And I'm like in the process of figuring out what I'm going to do next for business. But I'm really just like taking my time because I know I want to do it intentionally and I want it to be sustainable and not burn myself out. I had like 9 employees. It was too much.
Yeah, totally fair.
So I'm just figuring out like what I am going to do with my life when I grow up still.
I love it. And you have some kiddos.
Yes. So I have 2 kids. They are 8 and 9. One's going to be 10 this month or next month. Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. A boy and a girl. The boy's older. My son is very enterprising child. Just like me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I remember her type, my daughter's.
Would she be the more emotional type?
Probably.
I think so. Yeah.
She's emotional, but she's also very chill. Like, she's just.
That's the thing about the emotional. They have very deep feelings and they like to just flow. They just want things to be like.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's her. And then sometimes like she just will like start a dance party and be like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God.
So she might have a secondary engaging type.
Yeah. Yeah. And her dad is very much like that. Like, her dad is like life of the party. So I'm like, I can see it, like that part of him coming out. And I'm like, oh my God.
That'll be fun. It's nice to have a balance of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. So you said that you're just like your son in that enterprising part. Do you find that to be beneficial and easier to understand him, or more headbutting challenge because you're the same?
A little bit of both.
Fair.
To be honest, some days I'm like, yes, he gets, like, I just feel like he gets things because I can just explain things to him in such a way that like it's just there. Like, he just gets it. That probably makes me like just trust him more, trust his judgment more, things like that. And I try to like not make it seem like I don't trust my daughter. You know what I mean? Especially also the older child gets that a lot.
It tends to work that way.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
But also I think you have this challenge of your kids are so close together, but there's still a year and a half between them. They really are at different stages, even though they're close.
Very
the
close.
Difference between 8 and 10 can be significant in some areas.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair that maybe we have a little bit more trust or, trust, but not needing to verify quite as much with a 10-year-old than we do with an 8-year-old. I also have a 10 and an 8-year-old. And that's very much true. Also different personalities. It's just a thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So that speaks to parenting the child that you have in front of you and not necessarily what you think it should be.
Yes.
But also you're right, not making it super obvious. Like, you're the one I trust, you're the one I don't. We don't put kids in boxes. But yeah, as a mom, the one that's like
you could leave home alone, and then the one that you really shouldn't if you'd like to come back to a house.
Right. Yeah. And for me, it's not that she's not mischievous at all. It's like her emotions, like she will just break down crying, like, and I'm like, all right, like
she needs a little co-regulation still.
Yes, a lot.
Which is so healthy and normal. You know, we all actually benefit from co-regulation.
Yes.
I think we made up this story at some point in our history that children should self-soothe without understanding that the ability to self-soothe is born of thousands of experiences of co-regulating with somebody who loves you.
Yeah.
And we lost that part. And so we want to just push them to get over it and push them. And it's like, no, bring it in. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of what you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, it is. It's like such a perfect segue into emotional availability. So, I was raised in an authoritarian household. First generation, I'm a first generation immigrant. So like we came to this country with a suitcase, you know, like just, we were like navigating it in it, you know, and my parents both had master's level degrees in Venezuela before we moved. And then they came here. That is all null and void. So they had to start all over again.
Oh, no.
From, bachelor's, master's, etc. And my mom went into a different field. She was an architect before. And she went into violin performance. My dad was an engineer and he got his PhD in engineering and like so but they are very traditional values. Like I remember, like it was like, just do the thing. You have to be smart, you have to get good grades, this is how you get ahead. Especially because that was how we got to this country, was from their education. Like they got a scholarship to study here, so like it was essentially,
it literally was the key.
Yes, the key for us to like get out. And when we got out of our country, it wasn't really that bad, but like it became so bad, if you know anything about Venezuela. So like to the point, like I couldn't even go visit anymore as time went by. So so basically that was like the stage. And so I remember, and we were in a coaching session, because I've worked with you in Sure Parenting since, I think I told you the other day, it was like 2020. Or like end of 2019-ish, 2020 is when like we really started working together. And I was going through a divorce and it was such a hard time. And I remember in one of those sessions, like as I was still living in that previous house, I remember my mother being like, I mean, who cares how you feel? Just do the damn thing and like and move forward. And it was such a moment for me to be like, oh, like no wonder I was not allowed to express how I feel at all. And very much like that shaped how I was with myself, with other people, etc. And I think like through our work, like I was able to, first of all, like, yes, co-regulate with my children. But before that even was available to me, I had to figure out what was happening for me and like my triggers and what was upsetting me. Also in our culture, like children are to be seen and not heard. They're supposed to be quiet. They are annoying. People say that they're annoying. This is a very stated fact, you know, of life. And like, it's this whole way that children are treated, that I didn't like that. I didn't want to do that. And it took a lot of internal work for me to get to that place to be like, okay, I think I came to you first because I was like, nothing is working. Like I am like putting them in timeout and it's not working. I'm like, it's making it worse. Like all I'm doing is yelling. Like it was a mess. Like it was such a mess. And then you added the stress of the divorce, separate the moving back and forth and all of this. And like,
and the pandemic.
Right. And the minor detail, global pandemic. And like, I was just like, I can't do this. This is not working. The style, like what I've been taught by my family, by my, culture, it's not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I need help.
So and it takes such courage to say that.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. You are, when I met you, I had already been following your business coaching because you're really good at that. And so when you reached out to me and we were able to kind of work together in that way, it was I had so much admiration for you to be able to be a complete rock star and know that. And then also go, yeah, but in this area, I want support. And that is hard for people. I think we get this idea that, but see, I'm a coach, so I should know. I know how to help people do things. I know how to get people motivated. I know how to help them break a goal into pieces and accomplish it. Like, why can't I just do that? And we get stuck there instead of going, okay, but I'm also a human.
Yeah.
I'm also allowed to need support because we're actually supposed to be in community with each other. It's not supposed to be the solo one and only show. And, to maybe give a little bit of grace to your family, they had to leave their community.
Yeah.
So the idea of, relying on your neighbors, whatever that means, whatever neighbors means to you, like that had to shift drastically. And if your language is different and your culture is different and you are allowed into the country from your performance specifically, it makes sense on some level that that's going to be the thing you cling to. Like, this is what matters. And all of that can't matter because it threatens our security. And what a beautiful thing for you to be able to go from that training to, but I really want this to look different. And so because I want it to look different, I have to do something different and to choose to be vulnerable enough to seek out input that could help you make it look different. And I love that. I love it so much.
Yeah. And I will say, like, because I chose this alternate route, like there was, and to this day, it's a struggle for my family to understand my choices in parenting.
Yeah.
And like, I think because of your support throughout all of these years, like I have been rock solid. I'm like, it's all right. That's your opinion and whatever. And it's been very beautiful because I actually shared with my therapist this a couple weeks ago. My mom was visiting and my son like completely shut down because she shamed him. And she was very upset. She's like, I just feel like I can't get through to him. And like, it's really hard to deal with when he just walks away from me like that. And I go, Mom, this is shaming. We don't do that. So, and it feels really bad. And like, he's not used to that. Like, I was fine because you did it to me every day.
So at some point you just numb out and you're like,
numb out. Yeah.
That we're going to hear.
Yeah. And I was like, this is how you could say something instead. Like, this is another way of doing it. And she was receptive to it. And I was like, that was like the first time that we were actually able to have like a constructive conversation about it, because a lot of times I get told, and not as much by my parents, but more so like my grandparents and my aunts and uncles are like, oh my God, her child is wild and he's going to be so bad because she can't get him in line and like, stuff like that. Like the traditional.
And we're not talking about this child like setting fires. We're talking about him having an emotion.
Right. Like him literally stomping off to his room. Like he doesn't even slam the door.
Yeah. I'm going to go regulate myself, which is actually mature behavior. And the idea that children should have no emotions and should never have any expression at all then makes that look like bad behavior.
Right.
Even though if an adult was irritated and rather than scream at people, rather than punch a hole in the wall, rather than do something childish, they chose to leave and go to their room, we would be like, yeah, that's adult behavior. That's how you're supposed to act. And it is very interesting because our stories will impact our perception.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed in that interaction with your mom is your ability to be emotionally available to her, not to tell her you're doing this wrong and you should have done this, but to say, right, I hear, maybe not verbally, but emotionally, I hear you. It feels awful that he left and you're confused and you're frustrated. I can explain that to you. I can give you other tools that you might use because I can see your heart. I see your goal.
Yeah.
And, what if you tried this? And to be able to approach her in that way, you have had to do a lot of healing.
Yeah.
And they say, I don't know why they say this, but it seems to be something I hear pop up in a lot of different circles, that when you're able to really deeply heal and release generational trauma, you heal generations forward and generations back.
I can see that now. Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
I very much, the first time I heard that, felt like, yeah, but no, doubt it. But I have seen some changes in my family. We're different. We have different opinions. We have different parenting. But some of the things that were just standard fare, they're not really happening anymore.
That's good.
And I'm like, all right, that's different. My body needs a minute to adjust because I'm not sure what to do right now.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful. It's amazing. And yeah, it's really something to behold, to watch that growth and that emotional availability blossom across the whole family.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something too that I thought was really important. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I circled back. You said that before you could even co-regulate with your children, you had to know yourself. You had to figure out like what was going on in you.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an important piece of this. I think we want to jump to the things that we mentally categorize as good mom. Like, well, a good mom will be able to sit there and be like, oh, I know, honey, you're so sad right now. But we miss that we're a human too. I'm noticing a theme. And we have all of this turmoil and baggage and stories and past and everything else in us too. And so we have to be able to first regulate us to be able to co-regulate with them. And that doesn't make us a bad mom. That doesn't make us failing because we need a minute.
Yeah.
It makes us aware. And it actually is demonstrating to our children what a person needs to do when they're feeling all of it come up is own that and go, I need a minute. I need to figure out what I'm doing and come back down before I can step in to this chaos with you. Because I'm not going to step into your chaos if I can't be the calm. And sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. The crying or the frustration is not going to hurt the child. Us coming in and trying to squash it can hurt the child.
Yeah.
So we have to get ourselves back to some place of equilibrium before we can step in and go, okay, I can hold yours too now. So I thought that was really important. I wanted to highlight that.
It is. It really is. And I think like starting from a good baseline, like I think in your process, you talk about like self-care and like the baseline of that, because if you're coming in at negative, it's just it's so tough.
Absolutely.
To get somewhere.
And I don't want people to hear that and blame themselves all the time either, because like you said, you were going through a divorce. You were in the middle of a pandemic. You had kids that had great schools that all of a sudden were closed. You are, there's all these other factors. Sometimes there's medical factors. Sometimes there's social factors. Sometimes there's work factors, money factors. Like there's a lot on the outside. And we can't pretend that one person is supposed to just ignore everything and always be zen and be in control. That's a myth. We're going to be impacted by our circumstances in our life, and ours is to actually acknowledge, like, yeah, going through this time is extremely stressful to my body, to my mind, to my emotions. I need insert thing here. And being able to voice that, being able to figure out, okay, I need some quiet. It can't be my kids' jobs to take care of me, but I need it anyway. So what do I need to do to make sure that I get some quiet within my day so that I can show up for them? And it might be noise canceling headphones, and it might be having the neighbor watch the kids for a bit so I can go on a walk alone. It might be that, you know, I put them to bed a little bit early and I go stand in the shower with the water pounding down on my head with my ears plugged, because it's like white noise. I don't know. Yeah. I've done that since I was a kid. It's like a kind of quiet. It's not silence, but it's like not noise either. I don't know how to explain it. Everybody has a different way to do that. But good mom does not mean pretending that your needs don't exist.
Agree. Yes.
And I think that you have gotten really good at owning those things, whether they're the same as somebody else or not. It's your body, it's your brain, and you get to say, this is what I need, and this is how I'm going to make sure that my need is met.
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes self-awareness and practice and trial and error, you know, like inserting it here. Oh, that didn't work. Like, let's do it. I feel like people just think like it's going to be this magical bullet. Like, and if it doesn't happen, like rainbows immediately, like let's ditch the whole thing. That's not it either. And that's another thing, like from your work, like, especially when I did the yelling, like not yelling, when I would like catch myself like after and you're like, yeah, but that is awareness. And I'm like, yeah, but it's after, that doesn't count.
Yes.
And it has helped me so much in so many areas, because I'm like, it is the same thing. It becomes the same exact skill as like being patient with yourself. Like if you notice it after, at least you noticed it, like instead of being completely unaware that it even happened.
Right. Or jumping to defense. Well, I only yelled because they, you know, and the bummer of it all is nobody can make you yell. You can yell. And that one, you know, yes, there's stress and there's stuff and there's, you know, all the piles of stuff, but then that awareness comes in to go, I am right on the verge. What do I need to decompress? What do I need to take some of that off my plate, to block some of it out, to create at least a bubble where I can be in this with my kids and not make them pay the price for the idiot at work, or for my ex annoying me, or for.
Yeah.
But that awareness, it starts, the first thing is really just saying, this pattern is something I'd like to change. And then it moves into not really noticing until after the fact. But then after the fact, you're like, oh, I did that thing again. And then you start to notice in the moment. You're like, what have I said? I do really silly stuff like that because then my kids laugh and it breaks the tension. And I'm like, okay, I don't often yell anymore, but I was a yeller like that. I really was. And I remember the day that I read a study about yelling damaging the brain, and I felt angry. I did not feel sad or remorseful yet. I first felt angry and defensive because I was doing different than my parents, and I was working so hard to do different than my parents, and I was still doing something damaging. And I really didn't like that answer. But once I had it, I was like, all right, well, then I need to figure out why I'm doing this and what I can do different. So I really understand that path from doing the thing that just feels natural and works, to, and for anybody listening to audio, there's definitely air quotes around the word works there, to noticing and stopping yourself in the moment, which is incredible. When you're able to intervene in an impulsive action, you really start to weaken that neural connection, and then to be able to do something else with it. I remember a step that I was at for a while was opening my fridge and just yelling into the fridge, not even words, just volume, because it needed to come out. And I didn't want it to come out and them to wonder if I was yelling at them. So I'd literally open the fridge and be like, yelling at tomatoes. And then again, it was silly, you know, so there was this tension release. And I would say, I'm like, I feel really frustrated. I needed to get that out. But it was so clear that it wasn't on them. It was my thing. And I don't need to do that anymore. But it was certainly a process. And I have so much compassion for each of us that's in that process, wherever we're at. And I think that there is a unique benefit to our children to watch us take on a challenge like that.
Yeah.
And I think we beat ourselves up because, you know, well, a good mom, again, air quotes, should never have yelled to begin with. That's unlikely. Most humans raise their volume when they're frustrated. And if you grew up in a home where that wasn't even ever a thought on anybody's mind to curb, then you're going to have to come across the idea and then choose to adopt the idea and then practice that skill of regulation and impulse control for a period of time before it becomes natural to you to do something else when you're frustrated instead of just yell. And I think that reality, accepting that reality, is really important if we're going to make lasting change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is your favorite way to connect to your kids emotionally these days?
Honestly, my kids are so good at identifying their own needs.
I love that.
Now, which is like, I mean, it's like bliss on that front because I don't have to come up with it. Usually it's generated by them. And so our favorite, like I would say most of ours, me and my son, I would say our favorite way is playing games. So we'll do game night like at least once a week. My daughter loves dancing, so we'll do dance parties in here. This is my space. You can actually see my living room. Yeah, so like we'll, you know, just like being silly, playing in some capacity. I am so happy. I just want to state out loud, so in case any other moms are the same, but like I have my own neurodivergence, let's just say, and I do not like playing. Okay, I do not like sitting there and pretending a doll is talking. Like that's just not my flavor. I am glad that my kids are finally moving out of that stage. Like I am so happy. Because that is not my favorite. And so this is so much better for me. Like it just feels so much better to like do a dance party. Like I would do a dance party by myself. Actually, I do that, you know, where like I'm not going to sit there and pretend the doll's having a conversation by myself. So I also just want to highlight that because a couple things. One, I think our kids go through these stages and we're like, oh my God, is it ever going to end? Like, do I have to keep pretending that I like this?
Yes.
Or like, it's sad. Like it is, I just focused on, okay, I want to connect with my child. This is what they want to do. They want to play with these trains or whatever the case is. Like, I'm going to do that. And yes, I can have limits and, you know, not do it for until I don't want to ever make it seem like I am obligated to do it. So I will say like, I will do it in 5 minutes after I've had my coffee. Yes. Or whatever. But my point is, the stages do change. They do pass. And like, you know, if you don't love the flavor of that connection that they're offering, there is hope.
There is. And there is a big controversy going on. It's interesting. You accidentally touched on it. So for those of you that know me, I absolutely love Casey Davis. She wrote How to Keep House When You're Drowning. And it is a brilliant book.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. There's a lot of it, but a lot of it is removing the shame. And, you know, your home is meant to serve you, not the other way around. And so anyhow, apparently on TikTok, which I don't watch TikTok, so I didn't see the original. She made a video that she doesn't do the pretend play little voices thing. That's not what she does with her kids. And she just tells them like, no, that's not what I want to play. And they go play with each other. And it's, my understanding is like, to her, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Well, the internet has piranha attacked her that she is a terrible mom and she is awful and all this stuff. And I'm like, where did you come from? Because like, she's a fantastic mom. We've seen it for like 3 years, 4 years. Like, what are we talking about here? But she's spicy herself, and she just did it. This I did see because it was on Instagram. Somebody had posted about, you're a terrible mom and they're going to remember that you're awful and don't love them, and like really dramatic. So she put that comment on the screen, and then she goes, just kidding. I bought a designer purse with all the money you made me with all your hate comments. And I laughed so hard because the point is, our kids need us. They need connection. They need to be able to spend time with us. But it does not have to look only one way. When you bake with your kids, you cook like full breakfasts with your kids or for your kids.
I cook like 3 meals a day for my kids. And and you help me to like not feel guilted into doing that and like doing it. I did set up better systems so that I'm better at it. But yes, we cook most foods. And like up here, so there's a little system that I use. I work sometimes from home. And so I like if they're home, they're always asking me for food, and they're always wanting to play with me. So there's like a little whiteboard up above my desk. So like when they come up here, they can just look at the whiteboard, and there's their playlist, which they write before the day, like on the day that we're home, and then the food. But yes, like we do a lot with mealtime. That's another connection point though.
It really is. And that was what I was trying to bring in, is like when children are little, bath time is a connection time. You know, you can turn these normal like care tasks, instead of just hurrying up and getting through them, they can be connection. And you know, sometimes often I'll be cooking dinner, and my middleest will say, he's like, can you play my game? And I'm like, I don't know. What precisely are you asking me to do? And he's like, it can be combined into anything. And I'm like, okay, well then I guess I'm a chef who's cooking dinner. He's like, okay. And he's happy. I'm still cooking dinner, but I'm playing the game.
Well, apparently we're in a game.
And it's so funny. And he's so flexible with that, because he just wants that. Yes, you matter. And he meets that with a lot of flexibility. He's like, you're Sylvanas. I actually don't know who Sylvanas is, but apparently that's the character I'm playing right now. Now I'm at work. Okay. And it's the funniest thing, because it matters so much to him that like, of course I can. But it also has been such a great opportunity for him to get that choice of, well, I can say yes and keep cooking dinner because there's like a time frame here, or I can say no and do something different later. And he's like, no, keep cooking dinner. I'll work that in. And I think that being able to have all that connection is really special. And then when stuff is a little haywire, that like deep one-on-one is great. I took my oldest out, just he and I, yesterday, and we went on a date. We had some stuff to do. There was a mishap earlier last week or the week before that I needed to correct, which he handled so well. He like said nothing, and like late that night, away from everybody, he was like, hey, I was a little like kind of bothered by this. And I was like, oh, really good information, because I saw that completely different, and we were able to have this conversation. So we fixed that, and we ran around, and it was just us, and it was sweet. It was nice. It wasn't anything crazy extravagant, but it was nice to intentionally focus on him. And I think sometimes we have a hard time doing that when we have multiple kids.
And especially being a single mom, like that gets really tough.
Yeah.
But there are times when you can do it. Like my kids have started doing more play dates with friends. And so like, then I'm like, yes, let's do it. Solo time with someone else, or during the sports practice of the other one, like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I think that those moments build this foundation of, you matter, you're important to me, and I care about your experience in the world. And so then when the big emotions come, that's where their baseline is. They already know that you care what they're feeling. They get to step into that next level of, I want to express how I'm feeling. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. Those lead to those better conversations. Not to confuse people and assume that children can always tell you why they're upset. That's a really hard question.
Some can, some can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easier than others. Even for us as adults, like sometimes we're upset or we're going through a rough patch and it takes us like a month or two to figure out what's really happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know right away.
And one of my favorite things that I focus on is accepting those feelings. It's like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I'm sad too, and I don't really know why.
Yeah.
I'll just be with you in the sad, man. It's not our job to make our kids' feelings go away. It's funny because so many of us grew up with the, you stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And that is a form of emotional intolerance. I cannot tolerate your crying. I cannot tolerate your distress. Stop it, make it go away. I'm going to stomp it down. But the kind of panicky, I need to fix it. I need to make it better. I need to make this go away. It's the
same thing. 100%. Yes.
And the in between is, oh, okay, sad happens. I'll be in it with you. We can be sad for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tolerate your feelings because these things happen. These feelings happen to these kids. They've not experienced them before. And this starts little, like 1.5. You'll have a kid and they're there and everything's fine. And all of a sudden they're frustrated, but they don't really know what frustrated is. And it feels like it hits them like a ton of bricks. Like you can watch, they'll be fine. And then they will be melting. Yeah. And we think they're being ridiculous, but really what's happening is it's distressing. Like, what is this? There is adrenaline and cortisol and my heart is beating and my throat hurts and I don't know what is happening. Yeah. And they need us to be like, oh yeah, this is frustration, or this is disappointment, this is sad. And it feels kind of crummy and it's going to get better. With my middle again, he and I recently had this conversation. I don't even remember what he was mad about. He was so mad though, like so mad. And I said to him, I was like, how big is your mad? Which sounds nonsensical, but kids think in terms like this. Little kids, he's 8. I was like, is it as big as the room? He's like, as big as the house. I was like, oh, that's very big. Holy smokes. You know what? Sometimes I feel as mad as big as the house too. And I know how to sit in that mad. So I'll stay with you until it gets smaller. It will never get smaller, he said. I was like, I happen to know that it will, but it's okay if you don't believe me yet. And we sat. And I don't remember what he did. I have different things my kids can do. They can smash an Amazon box. They can scribble. They can, there's lots of, I have a whole free download on my website for redirecting anger, usually, to more appropriate targets. So he was doing something. And I said, how big is it now? And he goes, probably as big as the room. And I was like, oh, it's shrunk by 5 rooms or so. And he kind of was like, oh, right. I said it was big as the house last time. Okay. Kind of stayed in it a little bit longer. He's one that tends to like repeat the story to like work himself up again. And that really, really irritates parents. But I feel like it is kind of like wringing out the last drag so he can truly move on. And he does. When he moves on, he moves on. It's fantastic. For 99.9% of things. He is still very, very sad. 4 years later, I believe, that I threw away an old toy that got moldy on the inside. He's still sad that happened. But other than that, he really does just let things go. And after a little while later, I asked him how big it was. And he told me that it was down to about this big, little like marble-y size. And I was like, wonderful. I bet that's something that you can hold. And we got a little crystal about the size of his mat. And he has it in his room to remind him that when his mat is as big as the house, it will get back to being small and manageable again with time. And he loves that. He loves it. In the very first moments of dysregulation, does he remember that? No, because he's human. But when I ask him, and he's able to, if he's able to answer, something to remember is some people are dysregulated to the point that they cannot access their words, which is totally fair. But if has verbal ability in that moment, then it triggers that whole scene, that whole like series of questions. And then he remembers, oh, right, it's going to get smaller. And my job isn't to make it get smaller. It is to hold the faith and belief that it will get smaller and to make it safe enough for him to process until it does. And it's been really eye-opening for him. He also really loved the analogy of the volcano and understanding where his lava level was before he blew. Yeah, it's interesting. My oldest does not really like analogies of any kind. It's very straightforward. He just likes facts. It's just
give it to me straight.
Brainchild. But my middle is the emotional child with a secondary enterprising, and that emotional part, like he loves to think about things and kind of, they're not precisely abstract. It's almost like taking a really abstract idea and giving him a way to make it more concrete. But that experience, he likes to think about things that way, and it helps him, So I think it's cool to find those ways to help them make sense of their emotional experience. But I also think that if you're just able to sit in it, even if you say nothing at all, that is significant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like those things that you're experiencing or talking about, I never experienced until I did it with myself when I was an adult. Like nobody did that.
Yeah. The reason I did it with him is because I learned that at like 34, I was like,
exactly.
Oh, that's right. The mad will get, how big is the mad? I never, it sounds silly, but it's a mindfulness activity. You do it with pain.
Yeah.
Where are the edges of your pain? What is it doing? Is it throbbing? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Like, so why can't you do it mad?
Right.
And as a person who used to say that I had a rage monster inside of me, I wish I had known that earlier, that I could conceptualize my anger in a more confined way, as opposed to just being completely flooded and overwhelmed and it seeming endless.
Yeah.
And so
I will say too, like, what I've found, not only for myself, but like clients that I've coached on like the emotional piece, that everybody has the feeling that's harder to process.
Yeah.
So like, just because you can do it for mad, and like sad doesn't mean you don't have a harder time with a different one. Like for me personally, shame is my hardest one. Loneliness was actually for a long time. And thanks to my divorce, like I can do loneliness now, like no big deal. Like it's really fine. But again, it's like a skill, like anything else. Like you go through it, you actually sit with it and like process it, and then then it's manageable. And once you do that so many times, you can do it again and again and again more automatically.
You're building those neuronal connections so they get stronger and stronger, and it becomes more and more automatic. What do you think the biggest difference is between coaching adults and coaching your kids through these things?
There's not as much baggage on kids.
Fair.
It's actually so much easier because like adults, we have stories upon stories upon stories. And with kids, like example, like the doggy, one of my friends, her two dogs ran away this week, and it was like a big thing, like in the neighborhood, everybody's looking for the dogs, etc. And like, and it's these little stories that like are, as children, we make up, right? So my daughter's like, well, why did the dogs do that? Did the dogs not like their owner anymore and they like needed to leave? And I'm like, no, the dog is distracted because there's so much cool stuff out there, like other pee and like things to eat. And they don't know consequences because they're dogs and they don't have that like long-term, etc. So I explained the whole thing and she's like, oh, okay, well, that's good. And that's it. And it went on. And then like she could gather the fact that the dog, didn't hate their owner and like it was not a big deal.
Yeah.
But oftentimes those stories, like as benign as that, can really like, because they're formed in this age, then like the person is replaying it for decades. And then you have a lot more to dig through.
Yeah.
So it becomes very difficult. And I always, like, my personal strategy for like attacking something like that is don't go after the belief that's like so formed. Like, I have a friend, she's like working on I am worthy. And I'm like, dude, why are you starting with the most difficult thing? Like, you literally have never done this work before. Like, let's start with like, I can receive a gift from a guy. Okay. Like, I can receive dinner without an exchange of like anything else. You know,
I don't owe somebody something.
I don't owe somebody something for a gift. Okay. Let's start there. And then we'll eventually get there, you know, but, like, that's why I feel it's so different for adults versus kids is like, we have that initial one that we form, and then like we just layer. Like, somebody told me it's kind of like when you stack those cups, and you like make a tower, like a triangle tower. So find one of the top layers and like not trying to get something from the bottom. The whole thing is like, you can go into like an existential crisis if you try to go for a belief that's too ingrained, too big, and you haven't done work around other.
And I think you set yourself up for a lot of feeling of failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so heavy, like unnecessarily. Like, let's make this easy, quick wins, you know, etc.
Yeah.
And for kids, it's like, also with kids, it's like asking them what those stories are. I think one thing that you've helped me to do with my kids is like, you know, try to get it to where like they get to a positive resolution or positive story after the fact. So, and that helps to prevent these like beliefs from gelling in.
Yes. Cause you pointed out with your daughter so well that they'll find a story. So if they go through something, you know, kids are so strong, and the most likely outcome is going to be resilience, precisely because they have you with them. They're not alone. They're not drowning in this situation. They've got their mom or their dad that's like, hey, we're going to get through this. And they're like, okay, but there's a lot of feelings. It's like, we're going to feel the feelings, and you're in it until there's a resolution. I've seen kids who, you know, are processing things like their house burning down. And of course that's terrifying and traumatic in the event itself, but whether that child is traumatized, that's not a given. They could not be. And I think we, in this kind of day and age, in this field, especially where we're so trauma informed, we sometimes forget that a thing doesn't automatically become a trauma. That it could be a very impactful event, but if you have a protective adult who is able to process with you and help you make sense of it and combine your emotional with the logic and bring it to order inside of your head, and you don't feel overwhelmed and you don't feel alone, then it's just a crappy thing that happened.
Right.
And that's a really important superpower that we have from that ability to be emotionally available for our kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this topic is so very important to me, and I'm so grateful for you coming in and sharing. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on this before we wrap it up?
I think just like give yourself grace. Like, these are not things like, especially if you came from anything like we've described of like your feelings were squished down, you weren't allowed to speak up, at any phase in your life if you felt that way. Because I know too, like some people were okay in their childhood and then get into like really bad relationship, and then that happens, you know. Absolutely. So it could be at any phase in your life, but give yourself grace and like, you know, find the small wins and just one foot in front of the other. And I think, you know, you will be amazed at how much progress you can do on your own, like internally, and like looking back. Like, I look back to like 2020 and I'm like, oh my God, like it felt so hard to parent when I didn't have these skills.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, yeah, it's like very refreshing, but just keep showing up. Yeah.
I love it. I'm so proud of you. You're amazing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our first one for this new little series that I'm doing. And Do you want to provide me some links for people to follow you? Are you doing that yet?
Yeah, just come to Mariana Feliz on Facebook or Instagram, but I suck at Instagram. It's not my fave. I'm a
not great.
Facebook girl.
Yeah, that's how we connected. So it makes sense. Perfect. I will make sure that that is linked below the video in the Facebook group. And when I post this on YouTube, then I will make sure your link is there too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.